We shall go on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Shikha Basi, and she's a Deputy Director of Neuro-Ophthalmology Department at Chennai, an immensely dynamic personality in this field of ophthalmology. And she's on an interesting topic, ischemic optic neuropathies, evaluation and management. So look forward to your very interesting talk, Dr. Shikha.
Thank you, Dr. Chitra. Thank you, Team ARC, for giving me this opportunity to talk about ischemic optic neuropathies, evaluation and management. So ischemic optic neuropathy term was coined by Miller and Smith, but its classification into anterior and posterior ischemic optic neuropathy is based on pioneering work of Dr. Son Singh Here, who identified posterior ciliary artery as the part where the ischemia occurs. PCA supplies the anterior-most part of the optic nerve, and the rest of the optic nerve is supplied by various other branches. Anterior ischemic optic neuropathy is further classified into arthritic and non-arthritic. Posterior ischemic optic neuropathy is also classified into arthritic and non-arthritic. And then there is a variant called surgical PION, about which we'll discuss later. Now, coming to the evaluation, any elderly patient walking into our clinic with a history of acute vision loss with features of optic nerve dysfunction, we should work him up for giant cell arteritis. Any history of emerosis, Fugax, severe vision loss, and presence of chalky white pallid disc edema, we should ask for systemic features of giant cell arteritis, and we should order for ESR and CRP, and if required, do a temporal artery biopsy to confirm the diagnosis before treating the patient. Any patient who has ischemic optic neuropathy with cilioretinal artery occlusion or choroidal infarcts, which basically cilioretinal artery and choroid is supplied by PCA. So if there's that involvement, then it's very peculiar of giant cell arteritis or the arthritic ischemic optic neuropathy. Other vessels can also be involved. So you can have central retinal artery occlusion. Patient can present with diplopia. Other features are the temporal artery may be prominent, tender, and ropey. Patient can have oral or tongue ulcers, scalp ulcers. Coming to the treatment, it should be co-managed with a rheumatologist. Initially, give a thumping dose of intravenous corticosteroids, 1 gram, and then follow it up with high dose of oral steroids, 1 milligram per kg per day, and it should be tapered gradually once the CRP and ESR comes down. Then you can keep the patient on low maintenance dose of 5 to 10 milligram. Of late, the steroid-sparing agents like tocilizumab have been tried as the treatment. Once the edema in these patients subsides with the treatment, patient develops cupping, which is present in around 92% of eyes with arthritic ischemic optic neuropathy, in contrast to 2% of eyes with non-arthritic ischemic optic neuropathy, as per this paper. Coming to non-arthritic ischemic optic neuropathy, we've all read Dr. Anthony Arnold's chapter on ischemic optic neuropathies in Wolstenholme, and he was the first one to notice that in NAION, optic disc perfusion delay is without consistent peripapillary choroidal perfusion delay. So this was suggestive of the fact that this vasculopathy is distal to the short posterior ciliary arteries. Now, these patients can have various risk factors, and when you work them up, the common culprits that are found are diabetes, hyperhomocystinemia, and obstructive sleep apnea. These patients present with painless vision loss, and it's present mostly on waking up in the mornings, and on examination, patient can have hyperemic disc or pallid disc edema, can have peripapillary hemorrhages, they can be sectoral disc edema, and the other eye usually is the small crowded disc, what we call the disc at rest. Another thing that is noticed in this entity is incipient NAION or diabetic papillopathy. In these conditions, the ischemia per se is very mild, or there may not be any ischemia. So the visual loss is very less in these cases. The other eye involvement is 14.7% according to the IONDP. But various other studies have shown that younger patients, the other eye involvement is almost 50%. Coming to the etiopathogenesis, it's multifactorial. The main factors are vascular dysregulation at the disc, embolism, compartmentation. And the nocturnal hypotension, which is around 10 to 15 millimeters of mercury, it occurs at night, is the cause of the loss of vision in patients in the early morning. But what's important is that though there is a vascular insult to begin with, it ends up in cellular inflammation at the cell level. There is an early and complicated immunologic response. The visual field abnormalities in these patients can be inferior arcuate, altitudinal, central scotoma, but according to Dr. Here's paper, inferior nasal visual field defect is the commonest defect, which is seen in 22.4% of patients. Coming to OCT, it can quantify the size of the disc. The Couplet's disc can be easily picked up. And what is important is the presence of subfoveal fluid, which you can see here. If that is present, then I know I can tell the patient I'm not too sure how much of the visual recovery will be there once this edema of the disc settles down, but I'm sure once this fluid goes from here, there'll be some amount of visual recovery. Then another thing is that the GCC thinning, which can be picked up on GCC analysis, is very early with ischemic optic neuropathy, occurs around 2.2 days after the onset of symptoms. As I said earlier, in acute cases, there is thickening of the RNFL, which becomes thinned out around 2 months later in 80% of patients. Then there's another entity called anterior ischemic optic neuropathy in patients with optic disc drusen. This paper by Dr. Valerie Pervin, it stated that these patients, their clinical profile is very much similar to the patients with NAION without drusen, but they are a little younger, and they have preceding episodes of transient visual obscuration, and the prognosis is more favorable in these patients. Coming to the treatment for NAION, a beautiful review article by Dr. Jonathan Trope. He has listed out all the possible treatment modalities that have been tried for this condition. And in conclusion, he's written that to date, there's no class 1 evidence of benefit for treatment of NAION. But as the saying goes, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Hence, we all continue to try oral steroids, intravenous corticosteroids, and sometimes
1 minute remaining, ma'am.
Corticosteroids. So the other eye involvement has been, people have tried pentoxifylline and aspirin to prevent the other eye involvement, but the results have not been too fruitful. Optic nerve sheath decompression trial was aborted because it led to worsening of the visual acuity. But what this study did tell us was that in around 42.7% of patients who were not treated at 6 months, there was 3-line improvement in vision. So coming to the last entity, that is ischemic optic neuropathy in the setting of hemodynamic compromise, like systemic hypotension and blood loss, which is seen in patients with spontaneous gastrointestinal bleeding or uterine bleeding or surgically induced hemorrhage. Patients develop bilateral simultaneous ischemic optic neuropathies. Other conditions where you can have bilateral simultaneous neuropathy is hepatic causes like hepatitis C, and where they're getting treated with interferon alpha. We've also reported a case of bilateral simultaneous non-arthritic ischemic optic neuropathy. This patient presented with alcoholic liver disease. This patient presented with you can see the sectoral pallor in both the eyes, superior sectoral pallor, and corresponding inferior arcuate defects in both the eyes. So in patients who have severe liver disease and have crowded disc, avoidable risk factors like anemia, hypotension, and hypovolemia should be taken care of promptly. So this was a key message from that paper. And this is my last slide. With that, I'll stop.
Yes. Thank you again, Shikha. That was a wonderful talk. So while we are talking about this, how common is a recurrent non-ischemic ischemic optic neuropathy?
Recurrent ischemic optic neuropathy is not too common. I have, in all these years, I have seen 2 cases. One case had APLA, that is antiphospholipid antibody syndrome. So when they have, protein C, protein S disorder, these conditions, the damage occurs recurrently. So the other patient had obstructive sleep apnea. So it was a kind of a chronic process of ischemia. So, but I wouldn't say that it's a very common occurrence.
Less than 5%, according to Richards.
Any other questions from the expert panel on this topic? Murli, or do you have anything to ask?
Dr. Shikha, I mean, what standard workup would you do for these patients with NAION? Do you routinely work them up for homocysteine?
Yes, I do. Younger patients especially. So if they are above 60, it's more towards arthritic workup. In the sense, I include CRP. But if younger patient, homocysteine, hyperhomocystinemia is fairly common. So yeah, I do include, along with lipid profile, complete hemogram and sugar.
So protein deficiency and antiphospholipid. Do you do
I can't hear you.
No, do you do a complete coagulopathy workup like protein C and?
No, I don't. That's the second line of workup. If the patient has recurrent, as I said previously, so not as a first line of investigation. I don't include all these. These are very expensive investigations, not really required.
And Shikha, do you include sleep study as now? Your threshold for advising sleep study is lower now? Or?
Yeah. It's again, there is a questionnaire. So if you kind of suspect it clinically, in the sense that the patient has a short neck and is obese, history of snoring is there, then if I'm suspecting it, we do send the patients for sleep study, and the numbers are increasing.
What are the measures you would take for the fellow eye to prevent getting the same episode?
So as I said, Dr. Chitra, that nothing really works. What I tell at the most is, if the patient is a hypertensive, we avoid the night dose of antihypertensive, but we are not really starting the patient on aspirin or anything.
Madam, I have a question on the YouTube chat box that is for the expert panel. Do you still give intravenous methylprednisolone for patient with optic neuritis if the patient presents like 7 to 14 days later? So anyone from the expert panel or Dr. Shikha, anybody can answer that?
Yes, I would. Even if the vision has recovered fairly significantly. So I would. I think it is, as Andy said, it's better to treat rather than not to treat. So while we expect that immediate recovery would have occurred, but there was one study which had actually tried to compare the differences in the RNFL in those who were treated and not treated, and they found, although the final visual acuity was similar, there was a thinner RNFL in them. So difficult to say exactly whether it's helping there or not, but I would say we should treat, especially they may be MOG also. So if you have not done the antibody testing, they may be MOG and they may come back with a recurrence. So always better to treat.
Dr. Murli, it is basically for if there are brain lesions present, it's the disease that you are, it's an autoimmune disease. So optic neuritis is just a part of it. So intravenous steroids is basically to kind of soothe that activated immune system. So intravenous steroids are definitely, it's not only for the vision, it's for the disease, whatever the entity, be it MS, NMO or MOG. As Andy also said in his discussion, that no treatment is not an option now.
So thanks a lot, Dr. Shikha.